Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Wisdom Window. I'm Maddie Cheers here with my co host, Marianne Franzese.
Hi, Maddie.
Hi, Mare. So, we are going to this week explore the cave. So, last week we talked about Plato's allegory of the cave in a little bit of detail. And over this week, Marianne gave some thought to the cave itself. So, I'm going to turn it over to you, Marianne.
Sure. So last week it was so interesting because part of this wisdom path that we're looking at is what is our own personal path to wisdom. And for me, the voice of the cave struck me very, very strongly. And after the show, I actually said to you, Maddie, like, what is that? Like, why was I so drawn to the cave? And again, just like, it was that just a big detour? And Maddie, you really wonderfully said to me, well, the cave is sort of like the vagina and the womb. And we're talking about Plato and the male scholars. So maybe there's something there. So, with that permission, I said, okay, I have to follow this path of the cave and see if there's anything there that I need to discover. So I let myself go there and I did a little writing, which I'm happy to share right now, just to give you a sense of, again, this like descent into the lead that the cave was presenting to me. It was as if the cave was screaming out to me, please notice me. Look at what his allegory has done to me. Free me of this impression that I am an unholy destination. Allow me to have my say. And so then I wrote from the voice of the cave. I am the womb. I am the temescal where babies are born into the dark and held by their mothers and grandmothers for 40 days before seeing the light. I am the place of birth. I am the dwelling of Mary Magdalene, the cave on top of the mountain in southern France, where she lived out her days after Jesus's death. I am the cave where she now holds the babies that never made it to earth or who died moments after birth. I am the container of grief. I am the cave where the mother bear takes her cubs and hibernates through the dark winter to keep them safe and sound. I am the mother's bed. I am the cave where crystals grow and minerals drip and carvings of ancient days glow with the magnificence of timelessness. I am the portal to other worlds. I am the cave that tends to the sick and holds the dead and gives home to the medicine woman. I am the seat of the healer. His allegory stripped me of my beauty and goodness and purpose and voice. He inserted his will to create his brilliant reflection of the powers that seek to diminish the full capacity of the human soul to move beyond duality. And in so doing, he diminished the love of the Mother God and her full capacity to hold both the dark and the light on the journey of the human into beingness. He was blinded by the light of his own awakening and never even noticed what he did to me in the telling of his truth. I am the grounding power of reconciliation. I am not a prison. A return to this wisdom teaching has created a cave in my very own heart where I summon Plato to come to the entrance and seek forgiveness for misrepresenting the power of grace and of the divine dwelling that can hold both darkness and shadows and takes no prisoners. I hear the Great Mother simply and clearly stating, surrender to the location and title of your deed, allegory of the cave. Return to the land, to the mother. Make the cave a destination of reconciliation and new creation, equal to the light of the sun. Your story has made the womb of possibilities a prison of duality. Nothing good can be born of that. And certainly, justice cannot be dreamed from this telling.
Wow.
And so, one of the main pieces that came to me after this was this idea of moving from the duality to the Trinity, to
Mm-hmm.
the sacred third, to that third point between the opposing forces, right?
Right.
That is inclusive of the marginalized voices. So within this story, I feel like the cave can gather in the wisdom circle all the voices, the voice of the fire, the voice of the prisoners, the voice of the puppeteers, the voice of the powers that be. And very reminiscent, Maddi, of the circles of our Native American brothers and sisters, of hearing all voices
Right. Right.
before reconciliation can even be approached. So,
Exactly. And what the original allegory comes out of is the whole idea of hierarchy anyway. You know, this
mhm,
whole idea that one group should be in charge of another group and that one group determines the other group's outcome, their life, how it should be lived. You know, so while the allegory itself in talking about truth, you know, in that the whole, like we said last week, the whole idea of if somebody comes and challenges your truth, you may not want to listen to them, especially
mhm,
not at first. You might even want to kill them. That aspect of it is still valid. However, there's so much more richness there, which I think is what you discovered in your writing,
mhm.
is that when we take, you know, I'm always reminded of my friends from my indigenous friends from Puerto Rico who talk about how when there was a hurricane, everybody just left the beaches, left wherever they were, went up in the mountains and hid in the cave. So the cave was a place of protection,
Yeah.
just like, you know, what comes up in your allegory. And I think too, what's very important is that we look at this in the broader sense, in that we have to include everybody's story. We have to include the light and the dark in order to transcend. We talked a little bit about that last week. Then this weekend, I'm taking this course on the 5 wisdom dakinis. Now,
Mm,
this is a Tibetan Buddhist approach to the world, which is different than some other Buddhist approaches, but it talks about the mandala, the circle drawing, the meditation, all of that. But what's very interesting, what I absolutely adore that pertains to this, is that when it looks at these 5 wisdom dakinis, and dakinis are the female deity representation of Buddha, right?
yes.
So this, aside from the fact that Tibetan Buddhism recognizes this sort of duality, because interestingly enough, the wisdom teachings are what you're talking about, the Trinity, that third place where both sides meet, because the wisdom teachings are the same whether you're talking about 5 Buddhas or you're talking about 5 dakinis. It's the same thing. And what they do is they have what they call the 5 poisons. All right. So
Mm,
the 5 poisons are ignorance, craving or desire, envy, jealousy, anger is another one, and hatred, and then pride or arrogance. Not pride like I did something well, but arrogance
mhm,
in something that you did. And that what they're saying is that within these teachings, the ignorance, the craving, the envy, the anger, the pride or arrogance, there is the birth of wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
So you have on the other side of craving, you have the wisdom of discernment, right? Being able to see clearly, being able to look at your acts and the acts of other people and discern what's the motive here, what's the wisdom here. When you look at envy or jealousy, and people that are always comparing themselves, that are competitive constantly, that also falls into that. But if you look at the wisdom aspect, they call that aspect all accomplishing wisdom, because when you go to the wisdom part of it, you are then taking action. These are people that take action towards their wisdom, that have some activity where they are contributing to the world based on what they've learned. So maybe they came from that highly competitive, comparing myself to everybody, but then moved up. And then when you go down to anger and hatred, which you could when I heard that, I was kind of like, God, anger and hatred, how can that transform into wisdom? And the wisdom it transforms into is very interesting. They call it mirror like wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about the mirror before, and in the case where you get to the mirror wisdom, it is where you're like looking into a clear pond that is reflecting back to you who you are. And the element is even water for that, because anger can be sharp and icy and cutting and chilling. And when you, but it can also spark in you, like you talk about justice in your piece, it can spark in you the idea that this is unjust. This makes me angry because it's not fair.
Yes.
If you stay stuck in the anger, you're not going to get anywhere. Then you're just running around being angry.
Mhm.
But if you move through the anger, you get to that wisdom level where you see in yourself the other person, and that makes you more able to communicate and to then bring them along with you to your wisdom place. And then the arrogance, the pride, leads to the wisdom of equanimity, where you finally see everybody as yourself. You are, no one is better than you, no one is worse than you. And that arrogance and pride and that ability to put people down, to be mean, to be cruel, all of that, if you start to look at that, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? It all leads back to insecurity.
Mm.
And so if you can deal with the insecurity in yourself, then you can start to rise to that level of the wisdom of equanimity. And this is they have a funny saying here. It's like they say you could you can eat you can have you can eat everything, they say, and it
Mhm.
all tastes good, even poop. It's like, okay, well, maybe not that far, but it was a very interesting saying, I thought, for equanimity. But that's the idea, is that inside of every darkness, like you so beautifully expressed in your piece, there is the light, or there it is at least the stairway to the light. If you
Mhm.
can embrace the darkness, if you can include it in your examination of the world and not deny it. Because if you deny it, then you're never going to get to that point of wisdom.
Well, and that's where the importance, even within the human being, our minds are set up to be dualistic. It's
Right.
it's the operating system. We know one thing as opposed to its opposite, right? So I know light because I know darkness. And that operates just between these two different forces. And it then categorizes good and bad, right and wrong. And these poisons are also like, they can be love potions, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you can have the poison of anger, but in fact there is this possibility to really transcend it, with the knowing that if you have um, one side, you have the other, right?
Right.
So if you have the anger, you have the mirror of we're all interchangeable. So that movement out of the judgmental spot of this is the right way and this is the wrong way, even though knowledge can tell us that this makes the most sense, this is what's fair, and the heart tells us this is what's merciful. If we are going to really move to transcend that duality, then we have to really start to cultivate the third. And
Right.
and the part of the piece that I came to in the cave is it is in this conception of the divine feminine, of the mother who can
Mm.
hold all, make room for all. Because once you're not hiding, right, insecure means you're not feeling safe. You're not
Right.
safe to show up in all of your faces. And once it starts to come to the surface, then at least with the proper grounding force. Because in the allegory, like you said, that was looking at the power position, the sacred third, that third position for the power that's hierarchical, right? One above the other. Where
Mhm.
the power that we're talking about is a kind of power of reconciling these very different forces and through that creating something completely new. It's
Right.
not one or the other, it's
Right.
birth. We are going to impregnate our wisdom with knowledge, with heart, and from that something new will be born. And that only happens when, you're right, human beings don't feel so threatened, because
Right.
everybody does want to, I think, ultimately be connected. It's just scary to surrender and let go of what we've always known.
In this time, in this COVID time, what's so interesting is people are craving connection,
Yes.
and we're missing the one-on-one huggy kissy connection, of much of our family. Some of our families are together, some of our loved ones are together, but all of us are missing pieces of our group. And
For sure.
the interesting thing about that is out of that is born this technological connection where we can across miles talk about ideas like this. And especially at a time when everybody's talking about we have to create a new world, we have to create a better world. But like you said, a lot of the talk that I'm hearing is, well, my way is the better world. Your way is not the better world.
Mhm.
So again, we're at that duality, and what we've got to get to is the unity, and that's that third point that you so brilliantly spoke about.
And I think
And the
this, go
go
ahead.
ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say, we have to start the process within ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
because we embody the Trinity, right? We have our
Right.
mind, we have our heart, and then we have this pathway to peace, pathway to wisdom. But to go there, it's funny, my co-host from Tug of Heart, Lori, we do a show together, and she says that I have a willingness to go down the rabbit hole and into the world of Alice in Wonderland
Right.
to find truth.
We love that world.
But I'm telling you, it is a tough reorientation. Like, it takes a certain level of practice to truly embody within, notice our mind, what our mind is setting up for us, how we are being in just the operating system of duality, of the good and bad and right and wrong,
Right.
and then have the willingness to sink into the heart, find, understanding, but then ultimately to begin to embody a presence that is aligned and alert and attuned to listening to the marginalized voices. Who haven't we heard from? Just that
Mhm.
question. Who haven't I heard from on this matter? Who do
Exactly.
I need to listen to? Because every one of those come into, again, this circle of understanding what it means to experience being human at this time. And those
Exactly.
are real forces. Every human being, battles those forces, those poisons. We're
Yes.
susceptible to them.
Exactly. And that's why you have to deal with yourself first
Hmm.
in order to bring that voice, that third voice into the world, because you have to know where your duality is. You have to
Yes.
know, you have to be able to say, oh, I want to be a unified being. I want to be an a wisdom of equanimity, or the all encompassing wisdom, of the center, where everybody's wisdom is valid, where everybody's thought is valid, and where we look at everybody's perspective, and then we can get to that point where we transcend, then we can get to the point where we do create something new. Otherwise, we're just recreating the old over and over again. And that's what we see happening,
Yes.
because we are
Same
so,
patterns.
especially in our country, we're so embedded in that duality. They're right, I'm wrong. I'm right, they're wrong. We're so caught up in proving that somehow. And to a degree, we have allowed our leaders to take us there,
Yes.
and we're going to have to pull it back. We're going to have to go back inside ourselves and say, what is it that makes me feel unsafe in
Hmm.
this world? And why does this voice make me feel safer, even when I see that that voice has lied to me or misled me, and that's where that I love that whole thing about discernment.
Mm.
That is what is so important, because you cannot discern even your own truth if you're not really listening to yourself. And this idea, like, I wanted to bring up this question that somebody asked me this week. A
Great.
young person, what a big surprise, asked me.
People ask the best questions.
Yes, they
Yes,
do.
they do. I
So,
love their
so
questions.
the question was, why do we need all this wisdom? Why don't we just create something new? And the immediate example that I thought of, don't ask me why this popped into my mind, because personally I hate to clean, but the immediate thing was, well, people are talking about saving the environment and how all these cleaning products are terrible, and they're polluting, and we shouldn't be using this soap, we should be using this soap, and all of this stuff. And I thought, well, if you want to make the environment cleaner, you have to go back to our grandmother's wisdom. You have
Hmm.
to go back and not just young people grandmother. Well, actually, some of them might have grandmothers that did that, but certainly our grandmothers were cleaning with natural stuff from the earth.
Yes.
They were clean Bonami. I forget what that is. But they, and water, hot water sometimes.
Mhm.
Just using hot water so you didn't have to go out and buy something. Steam cleaning. I mean, there's all these old ways of cleaning that are becoming new again, because, oh, this is more environmentally sound. We're going to do this now instead of that. And in the same way that we had to go back to what were those more environmentally less expensive, less consumer oriented products, we had to go back a couple generations to figure out what those were. And it's the same thing with the big questions. All humans, ever since there have been humans, have been asking themselves, what is the meaning of life? Why am I here? Why is there cruelty?
Mhm.
That was another thing. There's another thing I was talking with my husband about this week, about with Bob, about the whole existential movement that arose. Because why? And that's what a lot of people who are anti-religion ask is, well, if God is so great, why is everybody suffering? Well, and the rather than just reject the idea of an ground of being an ultimate spirit, you know you have to change your view of what God is. God's not changing, and whether you want to call it the great spirit or the great mystery,
Mhm.
we're not on that time. We're not in that brain. We're not that source, you
Mhm.
know. And then you've got, on the other hand, you've got atheists say, well, no, we can explain everything with math and science. Well, where'd all the math and science come from?
Mhm.
I mean, it's like, if you can explain everything with a system, with an operating system, who put the operating system there?
Mhm.
Somebody put it in your computer. So it to a degree, in order to allow ourselves to transcend, we have to shift very often our view of what spirit is, but we also have to shift our view of who the other is. It's like you say, with the unheard voices. you know
Absolutely. But I think that I love the question. And I also love where your kind of wisdom took you naturally, which was to the cleanup, because I do think that is inherent in why we, our wisdom windows are really dirty, right? So there is nothing to me more disturbing than when I look out a window and it's covered in dust and I can't fully see what's on the other side. And nothing more enjoyable than that sparkling clean window without streaks. So our portal into knowing has become very polluted, and it's part of the lost, part of how we've gotten lost
Mhm.
by these systems of power that are based more on dominance
Right.
rather than unity. So for me, part of why do we go back? We go back as a cleanup, right? We go back to kind of those original teachings to begin to clear away, find that universal aspect of what it is that human beings are capable of doing. And from there, not just like pull the teachings and say, okay, this is exactly how we're going to do them. It's pulling a seed that is still organic, that hasn't been genetically modified. It's this seed, and bringing it to the current soil, bringing it to the current climate, to the current place of commitment to reorientation and rebuilding and recreating something that is sustainable for the next generations forward.
Right.
So, wisdom is a form of healing, and it's the recognition that we have really damaged ourselves. We have damaged the earth. We have damaged our minds, our bodies, our spirits, our sense of connectedness, our mental health. So much of our health has been severely compromised because we lost sight of some of the simpler truths. So I think there is this process of cleaning up. You mentioned that last week when you were talking about Ken Wilber, right? His
Right.
stages of wake up, show up, clean up, grow
Right.
up. I don't know all of his, but
It's
clean
showing
up.
up,
This is
growing
clean
up.
up.
Right. Showing up, growing up, and waking up, but you can't wake up until you clean up, is what is the way he puts it, is that you've got to clean up your own muck.
So, Maddie, I can't get away from cleaning up.
I know.
I've spent my
That's it.
whole life
Now I have to go
teaching
clean
them
my
for 4
windows.
kids, cleaning their
I
mess, and I'm
My niece did turn me on to. Am I going to give you the name of it? No, because I can't remember it. But she did turn me on to these. You can find them on Amazon. These cloths that you can clean with, where all you need is water. You don't even need soap. So we are creating some new products with our new technology, but still hanging around. We have a lot of those old products, including just plain old hot water, which is what you use with these cloths, and they clean great. Not that I remember the name, but look them up. So.
And I think part of, the other piece is that if we can start to create these wisdom maps, right? Just like the
Mhm.
heart maps that I've been really working on trying to understand. But the wisdom maps show us where we all belong together. It goes back to Bob's original definition he gave us, Bob Vetter, your husband, when he said to us, wisdom looks at something that is going inward individually, finding an individual truth that then can really be seen as a universal truth.
Right.
So, this individual journey into the universal, and that shows us where we all belong, right?
Right.
Our interconnectedness. Like,
Right.
yes, that's me too. It starts to heal this disease of disconnect, of disassociation from each other, of seeing each other as actually like totally different breeds of people versus, we are all part of this interconnected community. But part of the cleanup is also looking at our own shadow place.
Yes.
So if we think that we are merciful and we have mercy in our hearts, then we also have the capacity to be harmful. It is there in us, and we need to be able to look at both of those sides so that we become in charge of them rather
Right.
than them running us and then running the world into destruction.
Exactly. So when we ask ourselves, why is there still cruelty,
Mm,
and why does God allow that, we have to stop asking why God allows it. We have to start asking why we allow it.
yes.
There's no, that you give up too much power when you blame someone, something else.
And
And
that actually is the true liberation, is
right,
the reorientation to this knowing that we actually seed our destinies.
right,
We actually create our realities, and either we do it consciously or it's done unconsciously. And when it's done unconsciously, there really damage can be done.
right. And we get to that equanimity when we follow the real quote, I believe, from Gandhi: be the change you expect to see in others. It's
Hmm.
not really be the change you expect to see in the world. The actual translation is be the change you expect to see in others. And that comes with a certain humility.
It does. And it's the same thing like the Jesus quote, love your neighbor as yourself.
Mhm.
That's interchangeable. That's saying you are interchangeable with
Right,
your neighbor. Like
right,
you, and same with Gandhi. You are expecting someone else to embody this change. You need to embody it as
right,
well. Like
right.
that is that's the work. That's the liberation.
That
I
is
do,
deliberate.
in fact, have this power. And again, because I think a lot of what we're talking about in the Trinity is the force, two opposing forces, one that may be affirming, one denying, and then this third point of power, which can either reconcile it through understanding or reconcile it through dominance. And I think we've really seen the way of dominant power. And then once dominant power has set off some systems, it will do everything in its power to keep those systems going.
That's right. Even though eventually they always crash,
Yep.
because it's like we said last week, it always ends up with that cycle of domination, revolution,
Hmm.
peace,
Yes.
domination, revolution, peace, domination, revolution, peace.
Let's change the pattern.
Yeah, time to, and I'm convinced, as you are, that it is that divine feminine consciousness, not male female,
No.
but that divine feminine consciousness that is much more all encompassing, like in the teachings of the five wisdom dakinis, where the central dakini, all in white, and the what they say is that when they show her in a mandala in white, it's really not white like the color white, it's like clear light.
Oh,
It
translucent,
represents this clear
illuminating,
light
emanating.
emanating, and she is the all encompassing wisdom.
Mm.
the
That's
ultimate wisdom.
beautiful.
And that's where I think we're headed, and that's where the that women, when we talk about this is the time of the woman,
Mhm.
that's what we're talking about.
Yes.
We're not talking about this is a time of the woman acting like men, or this is a time of the men acting like women. This is the time of that consciousness,
Yes.
that feminine consciousness of motherhood and grandmotherhood and clan motherhood that can bring about this unity.
Well, because I think in that stance, mother connects both heaven and earth,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's the grounding from the heart into the mother earth, and it's grounding up from the heart into the heavens. And that combination allows this emanating of that type of light that is very inclusive, and I believe truly healing and open. So, one of the things to keep in mind in the coming week, right, as we're
Right.
involving with this, is one, where duality lives in your own life, how to find that third point, that sacred third, to be able to also, again, follow the little tease that wisdom might give you. That's how I felt. That's what the cave did for me. In the When I heard the allegory, it said, follow me, I've got more to tell you.
Mm.
Follow it, see what it has to tell you, go deep in there and trust that it may lead you to an insight that you didn't have before, which is really the pool of wisdom that's accessible to all of us. It's
Oh,
true.
beautifully put. So, listeners, I hope you do get to explore the cave this week. I hope that you also get to explore the dualities of your life and where your internal self needs to unify. So, all of that would be fun stuff to look at this week, and join us again next week with your answers. And please share with us, comment. For right now, we will only be found here on Facebook on Strong Island Radio, and sharing it throughout Facebook. And we will also be found on YouTube, Strong Island Entertainment YouTube. You can find that. I think you can even look up directly the Wisdom Window for YouTube. But as always, with podcasts blowing up, we need a bit. We're going to have a few weeks before we're approved on several of the other major sites, but then we'll be there. I have no doubt that we'll be approved. We'll be unified with all those other podcasts. So please join us again next week. Please send us comments, questions. You can always go to the Women's Oneness Project. This is posted there. It's live now there, and you can put your comments there if you want to send a question or even a show idea. Some idea you may have for the wisdom window, some window that opened for you. Please send it to Maddi, Maddi, at womensoneness.com. That's Maddi, Maddi, Women's Oneness, all one word.com, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope to see you back here next week. Thank you.
Take care.
Take care, Mare.